Zelara floated above the training grounds of the Vira Council, her wings catching the sunlight and scattering tiny rainbows across the polished metallic floor. She had always found humans fascinating, though in a way that amused her more than anything else. They were fragile, unpredictable, and so stubbornly persistent, a combination that often made them appear ridiculous to her kind. But today, her amusement had a target. A new human ambassador, Rin, had arrived, and she intended to test him. "You know," she said, her voice like wind chimes over glass, "humans can't breed any time. You're limited, slow, weak." She hovered lazily, a playful smirk on her sharp, angular face. Her eyes sparkled with mischief, the kind that came from decades of superiority and confidence in her own species. Rin, standing stiffly in the middle of the grounds, didn't flinch. He was shorter than most Vira, and his body was softer, less defined. His skin carried no shimmer, his eyes lacked the depth of Vira opalescence. Yet there was something in his posture, a quiet steadiness that made Zelara pause, only slightly, but enough for him to notice. "I may be limited," Rin said, his voice calm but firm, "but limited doesn't mean incapable. I can prove you wrong if you want me to." Zelara laughed, a sound like bells echoing in a hall. "Prove it, against biology itself." Her wings fluttered, casting shadows that danced across his face. "You're amusing, little human. You actually think you can defy what your species cannot do naturally." Rin's jaw tightened. He wasn't going to argue about biology or weakness. That wasn't his approach. Humans were different. They adapted, learned, and overcame. His species had survived, thrived, and built civilizations despite disadvantages that would have destroyed almost any other race. That strength wasn't visible in muscle or wings. It was in spirit. "I'm not here to argue," he said, keeping his gaze steady. "I'm here to show you that humans have abilities you can't measure at first glance. If you want to see, I will demonstrate it." Zelara tilted her head, curiosity flashing in her alien eyes. She hadn't expected him to respond with such quiet confidence. Most humans she had encountered quaked under the smallest challenge. But this one, he was different. A spark of interest ignited inside her, something unfamiliar. It wasn't fear or submission, it was defiance. "You think your little body and weak species can do what we can?" she asked, her voice softer now, carrying a hint of challenge rather than mockery. Rin took a deep breath and squared his shoulders. "I know we can, you just haven't learned how yet." Zelara blinked. That was bold, almost arrogantly so. She had teased countless creatures, watched them crumble, falter, and fail. And yet, standing before her, this human radiated a quiet power that was invisible but undeniable. For a moment, silence fell over the training grounds. The other members of the council watched from the sidelines, curious about this unusual confrontation. Zelara's wings twitched. She wasn't sure if it was excitement, irritation, or something else entirely. "Fine," she said finally, circling him in the air like a hawk inspecting prey. "Show me then. Prove me wrong." Her voice carried amusement, but behind it was something else. A challenge, a spark of interest, a desire to see if he could truly surpass the limits of his kind. Rin's chest rose and fell slowly as he absorbed her words. This was it, the first step in showing the Vira that humans were not weak, not easily defined, and certainly not predictable. He didn't speak further. Instead, he lowered his stance slightly, centering himself, letting the quiet determination inside him take control. The training grounds, filled with sunlight and the soft hum of alien wings, seemed to pause, waiting for the impossible to unfold. For Zelara, what began as amusement began to twist into fascination. She had expected a human to fail, to collapse under the weight of her doubt. Instead, she saw a glimmer, a human ready to defy expectation, ready to show strength that she hadn't imagined possible. And in that instant, something unspoken passed between them. A challenge had been set, and neither would retreat. Rin's journey to prove her wrong, to redefine what humans could do, had begun. After the challenge in the training grounds, Rin retreated to the human quarters beneath the Vira Council chambers. It was a small, modest space, nothing like the shining halls of the Vira, but it was his sanctuary. There he could think, plan, and prepare without the constant gaze of alien eyes upon him. He pulled out data pads, Vira biological studies, and his own human records, spreading them across the metal table. He knew the challenge Zelara had given wasn't about strength or speed. It wasn't about muscle or endurance. It was about timing, adaptability, and precision. Humans were capable of incredible things, but only if they understood their own limits and how to push beyond them carefully. Rin ran his hands over his own arms, feeling the soft skin, the normal muscles. He could not compare to the Vira, whose bodies shimmered with enhanced tissue, or whose minds could regulate almost every function instinctively. But he had something else: calculation, patience, and willpower. He began a regimen that was both physical and mental. He measured heart rates, monitored oxygen levels, practiced controlled breathing, and tracked cycles of alertness and fatigue. Every detail mattered. Humans could not operate constantly at peak, but they could synchronize their efforts, and that was where advantage lay. Zelara appeared unexpectedly, her wings folding neatly behind her as she leaned against the doorway. "Still fiddling with those primitive charts?" she asked, her voice light but teasing. "I thought humans liked to rush into things to fail spectacularly." Rin looked up, a small smile forming. "Rushing is easy, planning is hard, but we survive because we plan better than most species think we can." Her eyes narrowed slightly, curiosity sparking. Most humans quivered at the idea of alien superiority, yet this one, he was calm, focused, confident in a way that challenged her assumptions. She floated closer, her wings casting long, delicate shadows across the floor. "I'm curious," she admitted softly. "I want to see how far you can go." Rin nodded silently and returned to his work. He spent hours analyzing data from previous human trials and Vira studies, trying to find patterns. When he saw how his own cycles aligned with potential performance, he adjusted, fine-tuning timing and effort. It was exhausting, mentally and physically, but he welcomed the challenge. Days passed. Zelara watched from afar sometimes, hovering on balcony ledges, observing without comment. Occasionally, she would peek into his quarters, making small remarks about human inefficiency or fragility, but she stayed longer than she should have, intrigued by the quiet determination she saw in his routine. One evening, after hours of testing, Rin leaned back and let out a slow breath. Sweat dampened his brow, and his chest rose and fell heavily. He had pushed himself to the edge of what he knew was possible, yet he felt a strange exhilaration. He was not just preparing to prove Zelara wrong, he was discovering the limits of his own body and mind. Zelara appeared again, this time silently. She had expected failure, weakness, and struggle. What she hadn't expected was to see him adapt. Every cycle, every adjustment, every tiny improvement revealed an intelligence and persistence that she found fascinating. "You know," she said after a long pause, "I mocked you because it was fun. But watching you now, it's almost impressive. Dangerous, even. You humans are more unpredictable than I imagined." Rin met her gaze, calm but unwavering. "That's always been our strength. Unpredictable, yes, but persistent. We may be limited, but we never give up without trying." For Zelara, those words lingered longer than they should have. They were simple, but loaded with truth she hadn't fully recognized. She had assumed humans were weak because they weren't like her species, because they didn't have her instincts or immediate advantages. But this human was teaching her something different. Strength wasn't just in form or power, it was in spirit, and in the willingness to endure and adapt. As the twin moons of Vira rose outside the quarter's window, casting pale silver light across the room, Rin continued his exercises. Zelara lingered, watching in silence. A subtle change had occurred. The mockery had shifted into curiosity. The challenge was no longer just for him to prove a point, it had become a lesson for her. And deep down, Rin felt it too. When the time came to demonstrate his full potential, it would not only surprise Zelara, it would shake the very assumptions the Vira had about humans. Tonight, in the quiet, sweat-damp room, both human and alien understood one thing. A battle of expectation had begun, and neither would retreat. The council chamber buzzed with quiet anticipation. Vira elders, diplomats, and scholars floated above the polished floors, their wings catching the light like liquid crystal. They had gathered to witness something unusual, a human demonstrating abilities beyond what they believed possible. Zelara hovered nearby, her eyes bright with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Rin stepped into the center of the chamber, heart steady, mind focused. The sunlight streaming through the high windows fell on him, illuminating his unremarkable human frame. To any observer, he looked ordinary, almost fragile. But Rin knew that strength was not always visible. It was in the control, in the timing, in the endurance that came from understanding one's own limits. Zelara's wings fluttered impatiently. "Let's see if you can even start," she said lightly, though her voice carried an edge of challenge. She had expected him to stumble, to falter, to provide the amusement she so often enjoyed when testing other species. Rin nodded slightly, closing his eyes for a moment. He felt his heart slow, his breath deepen, and his body respond to the patterns he had been practicing for days. Humans could not push endlessly like the Vira, but they could optimize their efforts with precision. That was his advantage. He began the sequence. At first, subtle changes registered in the chamber's monitors, a slight increase in body temperature, minor shifts in heart rhythm. Zelara smirked. "Weak," she whispered, confident in her judgment. Most humans would collapse at this stage, overwhelmed by even a fraction of the strain he imposed. But Rin did not collapse. He adjusted, recalibrating each movement, each breath. He pushed forward with steady persistence, controlling every reaction, every tiny surge of energy. The monitors responded, slowly at first, then more strongly. Pulses of data showed a rhythm that had never been recorded in the Vira archives for any human. The council murmured, soft whispers rippling through the chamber. Some Vira leaned closer, incredulous. They had mocked humans for centuries, claiming predictability and weakness. But now they saw a human bending his own biology with discipline and intelligence. Zelara's eyes narrowed, her playful smirk fading. "Impossible," she muttered under her breath. She had expected entertainment, not astonishment. The human before her was defying expectation with a quiet power that was almost painful to admit. Rin continued, feeling the weight of attention, but also a strange exhilaration. He was not trying to prove that humans were stronger physically. He was proving that determination, adaptability, and understanding one's own limitations could achieve the impossible. He felt the rhythm of his body synchronize with his mind, a perfect alignment that seemed to transcend what the Vira had always believed possible. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours. Sweat beaded on his brow and every muscle ached, yet he pressed forward unwavering. Zelara hovered closer, unable to look away. Each pulse on the monitors, each data spike, spoke not of weakness but of human ingenuity, a force that no alien physiology could fully predict. Finally, the sequence ended. Rin exhaled slowly, muscles trembling but intact. The chamber was silent for a heartbeat, then erupted in astonished whispers. Zelara's wings twitched as she looked at him, her expression unreadable at first, then slowly softening into something akin to respect. "You actually did it," she said softly, her voice carrying an unspoken admission. "You proved me wrong." Rin opened his eyes and met hers, calm and composed despite the exhaustion. "Strength isn't always what you see," he said quietly. "Sometimes it's what you refuse to give up on, even when everything tells you that you should." The council members, even the most skeptical elders, were visibly impressed. Humans were not supposed to perform like this. Yet here stood living proof that perception, patience, and perseverance could challenge even the most rigid assumptions. Zelara's smirk returned, but it was tempered now with intrigue rather than mockery. The amusement she had anticipated was replaced by something she hadn't expected: fascination. The human she had teased, doubted, and dismissed had shown a power beyond her initial understanding. For Rin, it was more than victory. It was the first step in changing the way his species would be seen by the universe. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but they were also resilient, intelligent, and capable of more than the strongest aliens could imagine. As he stepped back from the monitors, sweat still dripping, he knew this demonstration was only the beginning. He had planted a seed of doubt in Zelara's mind and awe in the council. And from that seed, the story of human strength would grow far beyond anyone's expectations. After the demonstration, the council chamber slowly emptied, leaving only a few lingering members and Zelara. She floated silently, wings folded, watching Rin as he collected his notes and straightened his uniform. There was no applause from her, no words of praise, only a quiet, careful observation that unsettled him more than mockery ever had. Zelara had come to test him, to mock him, and perhaps to entertain herself at the expense of his species. But what she saw now was unsettlingly different. Humans were supposed to be fragile, predictable, and easily understood. Rin had proven none of that. He was methodical, adaptable, unyielding, qualities she had long associated with Vira strength, not human resilience. She approached him as he stepped into the corridor, her wings casting long, iridescent shadows on the floor. "I mocked you," she began softly, her tone uncharacteristically quiet. "Not because I thought you could win, but because I expected you to fail. And you didn't." Rin met her gaze, calm yet intense. "I don't think humans are weak," he said simply. "We have limits, yes, but we can exceed them if we understand ourselves." Zelara's eyes flickered with something she rarely felt: unease. She had always believed in her own superiority, in the predictability of other species. Humans were supposed to confirm that belief, not challenge it. Yet here was a human who didn't just challenge her assumptions, he unsettled them entirely. "You've made me question things," she admitted, her voice low, almost confessional. "Things I never doubted before, and that is uncomfortable." Rin studied her carefully, noticing the subtle shift in her expression. The smirk that had always been her armor of superiority was gone, replaced with something quieter, more introspective. "You're curious," he said, almost like a statement of fact. "You want to understand how humans can do what we do." Zelara hovered closer, her curiosity evident in the way her wings twitched. "Yes," she said, almost reluctantly. "And that scares me. I'm not used to a species surprising me." For a moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the faint hum of the Vira chamber's life support systems. Zelara was experiencing something new. The challenge she had intended for him was now turning inward, forcing her to confront her own biases, her assumptions, her sense of superiority. "You're very different from what I expected," she said finally, her voice softening. "And I think that's why I keep watching you. You make me rethink what humans are capable of." Rin nodded slowly. "We're often misunderstood, but humans survive because we adapt, because we refuse to give up, and because we're willing to learn, sometimes from those who think they know more than we do." Zelara considered his words carefully. She had underestimated humans for centuries, assuming weakness where there was potential, assuming predictability where there was creativity. Rin's quiet determination was teaching her a lesson she hadn't realized she needed. "You've changed something in me," she admitted, wings folding closer to her body. "I mocked you thinking it was harmless, but now I feel challenged in a way I never have before." Rin smiled faintly. "Challenge can be uncomfortable," he said gently, "but it's how we grow. You're learning that now." Zelara's eyes lingered on him, and for the first time she saw more than just a human body before her. She saw intelligence, endurance, spirit. She saw a being capable of defying expectations, not through sheer force, but through patience, will, and understanding. As the twin moons of Vira rose above the council chambers, casting their pale light across the corridors, Zelara finally let herself acknowledge something she had avoided for far too long. Humans were not to be dismissed, and Rin was extraordinary, even by her high standards. The lesson was clear, unspoken, yet powerful. The mockery had ended, but the tension remained, a tension that was no longer about superiority, but about respect, curiosity, and the quiet acknowledgement that humans could challenge even the most confident of aliens. Rin walked on, leaving Zelara hovering in the corridor, her mind alive with thoughts she couldn't quite organize. And for the first time, she felt the thrill of anticipation, not for a battle but for understanding, and for what humans might truly be capable of if given the chance. The Vira Council had gathered once more, this time in the Grand Hall, a vast chamber of polished silver and floating platforms, illuminated by twin suns filtered through translucent crystal domes. Every elder, diplomat, and scholar was present, their wings unfurled, eyes glowing with curiosity, doubt, and anticipation. Today, Rin would undergo the final test, the demonstration that would either cement his species as laughable or reveal a truth they had never considered. Zelara hovered near the entrance, her gaze fixed on Rin. She had watched him train, observed his preparation, and seen the quiet strength that had impressed her beyond expectation. But this demonstration would be different. It would be public, measured, and scrutinized by every influential mind on Vira. Failure was not an option. Rin stepped forward into the center of the chamber. He could feel the weight of their stares, the subtle vibrations of wings in the air, the hum of monitors designed to capture every detail of his physiology. Yet he remained calm. Humans had an advantage the Vira could not fully predict: patience, control, and the ability to synchronize mind and body with precision. "Begin," Zelara said softly, more to herself than to him. Her wings twitched, betraying the tension she felt. She had expected entertainment, perhaps mild embarrassment, but not the controlled mastery that Rin now radiated. He started his sequence, slow at first, letting his body adjust and synchronize with his own rhythms. The monitors flickered as they detected irregular patterns at first, but then his control became evident. Heart rate, respiration, and internal cycles aligned perfectly, forming a rhythm that was almost mesmerizing in its precision. Whispers spread across the chamber. Many Vira had assumed humans were weak, unable to manipulate their own bodies beyond simple survival. Yet here was Rin, bending his limitations with logic and focus, achieving synchronization no human, or Vira, had previously demonstrated. Zelara's lips pressed together, her amusement fatting. She hovered closer, unable to tear her gaze away. Each pulse of the monitors told her something she had never admitted aloud. Humans were capable of things her species could not predict. Their strength lay not in sheer power, but in adaptability, intelligence, and perseverance. Minutes passed like hours. Rin's body moved through sequences designed to test endurance, control, and resilience. He felt the strain, of course, the fatigue that came from pushing limits, but he welcomed it. Every ache and tremor was a reminder that humans had to earn their victories, and this one was for more than just himself. The council watched in silence, astonishment growing on every face. Elders whispered to each other, scholars scribbled notes furiously, and Zelara remained frozen, her mind racing. She had teased, mocked, and doubted. Now she found herself in awe, unable to deny the evidence. Finally, Rin completed the sequence. His chest rose and fell heavily, sweat dampening his brow, but his posture remained firm. The monitors confirmed what everyone had begun to suspect. The human had exceeded expectations, bending limits in ways no Vira had imagined possible. Zelara exhaled sharply, wings twitching in disbelief. "You actually did it," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Her usual arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw mixture of respect, wonder, and something she hadn't expected, curiosity that felt dangerously personal. Rin looked at her calmly. Strength isn't always what you see, he said. It's what you refuse to give up on. It's how you rise after every failure, how you learn, adapt, and persist. The council erupted into murmurs, some awed, some hesitant, all reconsidering their assumptions about humans. For centuries, they had dismissed the species as weak, simple, and fragile. Now, standing in front of them, Rin had rewritten that narrative with nothing more than determination and understanding of his own limits. Zelara hovered silently for a long moment, processing the revelation. This was no longer a human who could amuse or frustrate her. This was a human who could challenge, who could teach, and who could change perceptions entirely. When the murmurs of the council died down, Zelara finally spoke again, softer, almost reverent. "You've done what I never thought possible. You've shown us that humans can defy expectation in ways even we cannot measure." Rin allowed himself a small, exhausted smile. He had not only proven himself, he had proven humanity. And in doing so, he had planted a seed of respect, awe, and curiosity that would ripple through Vira society for years to come. For the first time, Zelara realized something profound. Humans were not to be dismissed. They were unpredictable, resilient, and astonishingly capable. And Rin was the perfect embodiment of that truth. The council chambers were quiet now, the grand audience having dispersed after Rin's extraordinary demonstration. The whispers of astonishment still lingered in the air, a soft hum of disbelief and admiration that clung to the walls. Zelara floated near the balcony, her wings folded but tense, her mind racing. The human had done more than prove a point. He had shattered her expectations entirely. Rin stepped out into the corridor, shoulders squared but chest still heaving from the exertion. His expression was calm, but there was a faint trace of pride in his eyes. He hadn't sought glory, he had sought understanding, a chance to show that humans were more than appearances suggested. And now the evidence was undeniable. Zelara approached him silently, her eyes scanning his human form with an intensity she had never shown before. "I underestimated you," she admitted softly, almost as if speaking aloud made it more real. "Not because I didn't believe humans could be strong, but because I didn't think any human could defy limits this way. And you've proven me wrong." Rin met her gaze steadily. "I told you we could. Strength isn't only about power. It's about knowing yourself, pushing limits carefully, and refusing to quit." She hovered closer, wings flicking nervously, betraying the emotions she rarely allowed herself to feel. Zelara had spent centuries confident in her own superiority, in the predictability of all other species. Now that confidence felt fragile. Here was a human, one human, who forced her to question everything she assumed about weakness, resilience, and possibility. "You've changed something in me," she admitted, her voice almost vulnerable. "I mocked you for sport, for curiosity, for arrogance, and you've turned it into awe. I don't know if I expected it or wanted it, but I can't unsee what you've done." Rin's gaze softened. "Respect isn't given lightly, and humans, we earn it through persistence, through effort, through showing that our limits are not absolute." For the first time, Zelara felt a strange warmth, a mixture of admiration, curiosity, and something dangerously personal. She had always viewed humans as tools of amusement or study, but Rin was more than that. He was capable, intelligent, unyielding, and yet humble. The combination unsettled her in ways she didn't fully understand. "You've made me question everything I thought I knew," she said finally, wings curling slightly. "And that it feels strange, exciting, terrifying even." Rin allowed a small smile to appear, the kind that was quiet but sincere. "Challenge can feel that way, but it's how we grow. You're realizing that now. You've seen humans are unpredictable and that we're stronger than you believed, not because of brute force but because of endurance and ingenuity." Zelara remained silent for a long moment, studying him. In the quiet of the corridor, under the pale light of Vira's twin moons shining through the windows, she finally allowed herself to feel the truth. Humans were not what she had assumed. They were something different, something remarkable, and Rin was living proof. "I've mocked, tested, and judged," she said softly, voice almost a whisper. "But now I want to understand. You've forced me to reconsider what humans are capable of, and I want to learn." Rin inclined his head. "Then I'll show you. Humans survive by adapting, by learning, by refusing to stop when failure is easy. You've seen a glimpse of that today. There's more." Zelara's wings flexed, her expression softening further. The mockery was gone, replaced by a mixture of respect, fascination, and curiosity that she had never allowed herself to feel for another species before. "You've done more than prove a point," she admitted. "You've made me see humans in a new light, and I want to see how far they can go." Rin felt a quiet satisfaction, not just for himself, but for his species. Humans had often been dismissed as fragile, limited, or predictable. Today, he had planted a seed of respect that would grow far beyond the council chambers. And for Zelara, the experience had been equally transformative. She had expected mockery and spectacle, but what she found was a truth she could not ignore. Humans were unpredictable, resilient, and capable of astonishing things. Together, in that quiet corridor, human and alien acknowledged a new reality. The challenge was over, but the respect, curiosity, and unspoken understanding that had formed between them would shape the future. For the first time, Zelara allowed herself to imagine that humans might not only survive but thrive, not because they were stronger than aliens, but because they were unyielding in ways her kind had never expected. Weeks had passed since Rin's demonstration in the council chamber, yet the memory of his performance lingered in every corner of Vira society. Elders discussed it in hushed tones, scholars wrote new analyses, and even Zelara found herself thinking of him more often than she cared to admit. Humans, she realized, were no longer a species to dismiss. They were unpredictable, resilient, and capable of astonishing adaptability. And Rin, he was living proof of all of that. One evening, Zelara found herself standing alone on a cliff overlooking Vira's twin moons, their pale silver light reflecting across the crystalline waters below. The wind carried a chill, but she barely noticed it. She had come here for reflection, for clarity, and perhaps for answers she had not yet asked. Rin appeared silently beside her, his human steps careful on the uneven surface. He didn't speak immediately, letting the view settle over both of them. The moons cast long shadows, and the stillness of the world seemed to echo the tension between curiosity, respect, and something more profound that had grown in the weeks since the demonstration. "You know," Zelara said finally, voice soft, "I thought humans were fragile, limited. I mocked you because I assumed weakness, but I was wrong." Rin turned to her, his eyes calm yet bright with understanding. "You realize that humans survive because we adapt, because we persist, because we refuse to stop when the easy path is to give up." She nodded slowly, the words settling like stones in her mind. "Yes, and you've shown me that strength isn't always about physical power. It's about determination, intelligence, and the will to rise above limits. You've done something no human has done before on Vira. You've made me reconsider everything I believed about your species." Rin smiled faintly, but it was not arrogance. It was quiet pride. "I only showed what humans can do when we understand ourselves. There's more in all of us than even our own kind realizes." Zelara's wings flexed slightly, catching the moonlight. "I want to understand," she admitted, her voice almost trembling. "I want to see how far you humans can go, and I want to see it with you." Rin's gaze softened, meeting hers. There was no doubt, no mockery, only recognition. Recognition of a bond formed through challenge, respect, and the shared understanding of potential. "Then I will show you," he said. "Not because I want to impress, but because humans survive by learning, by pushing boundaries, and by refusing to give up. And now, I want you to see it too." For a long moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the faint sound of wind over the cliff. Zelara realized she had never felt such a mixture of respect, curiosity, and awe toward another being, not just another species, but one individual who defied expectation in every possible way. "You've done more than prove a point," she said finally. "You've changed the way I see the universe and the way I see humans, and maybe even the way I see myself." Rin looked at her quietly, letting the weight of his own journey settle. He had come to Vyra to represent his species, but he had discovered something more: the power of human persistence, the force of spirit, and the capacity to inspire even those who once doubted. Together they stood on the cliff, the twin moons reflected in their eyes. The air was crisp, the night quiet, and in that stillness a truth emerged. Humans could achieve the impossible not through arrogance or force, but through willpower, intelligence, and determination. Zelara finally smiled, a soft, genuine expression that carried respect, fascination, and something more, a promise of curiosity, understanding, and perhaps friendship. "Then show me," she whispered. Rin nodded, feeling a warmth of pride and hope. Humans had been dismissed, underestimated, and mocked for centuries. But now, in the light of the moons, a human and an alien both understood something extraordinary. The universe had never truly known what humans were capable of. And together, standing on the edge of possibility, they would show it. The wind carried their resolve across the cliffs, a quiet testament to human resilience, alien curiosity, and the unshakable truth that limits could always be challenged. And sometimes they could be shattered entirely.